Just because a character isn't the major antagonist doesn't mean that they can't have a large impact on the story. So who is the most important minor antagonist in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? When we discuss JoJo villains, certain names immediately come to mind, being Dio, Cars, Diavolo, and Pucci. You know, these are the heavy hitters, the villains who had defined their respective parts, but what about the characters who operate behind them? For this analysis, we need to establish clear criteria. We're looking for antagonists who don't end up joining the Joestars and have no blood relation to either the Joestars or the Brando lineages. This eliminates characters like Bruno who become an ally or Dio's sons who carry Dio's blood. Oh, except for you, Rikiel. You're not going to get mentioned again in this video, but you can stay. The question becomes, which of these secondary players actually carry the most weight in the overarching narrative of JoJo? Now, before we can find out who is the most important minor antagonist, we need to understand the hierarchy of JoJo antagonists. Main antagonists are the ultimate threats of their parts. Dio Brando in Phantom Blood, Pucci in Stone Ocean. These characters represent the final obstacle and are the core conflict that drives the entire part. Their defeat resolves the entire storyline. That's kind of the idea. Primary antagonists operate a level below this. Now, they're major forces who end up shaping their parts also, but they aren't the final boss. Now, Yoshihiro Kira is a clear example of this primary antagonist. As the father of Yoshikage Kira, he had prioritized keeping his kids safe from consequences. He had been incapable of protecting him in the house, so he had instead cleaned up whatever mess Yoshikage made that he couldn't take care of himself. He had helped him for when Kira had murdered Reimi. He had created the stand users meant to keep the Morio warriors away from him, and he had actually pierced his own son and himself too. But the most important primary antagonist, I think, would be Enya. She had purchased 5 stand creating arrows from this 19-year-old Diavolo, which is crazy that he was a part of an archaeology team. That doesn't really come up too much. I feel like that's a large thing that is very important, but to each their own. Now, Enya had used one of her arrows on Dio, awakening the world that had triggered the stand manifestation of the entire Joestar bloodline. This had created the main crisis of Stardust Crusaders, that being Holly's stand illness. Now, before that event, just having her son Jay Guile had meant that Polnareff was going to join the Stardust Crusaders eventually to get his revenge. In Morio, Yoshihiro and what he had been doing had been because Enya had also sold him a stand arrow. She had sold an arrow also to Keicho Nijimura. She's kind of giving these out. How in the hell were all of these people connected to Enya? Who is talking to, like, I get it. Okay, you know, I get the Keicho Nijimura. Okay, his dad connected to Dio. He got, this is all really convenient. But putting that to the side, you know, Josuke and Kira are both fighting as products of Enya and Dio. It's ridiculous. And then we're going on into Golden Wind, where Diavolo, who sold the arrows to Enya, faces Giorno Giovanna. This is Dio's son, whose stand abilities exist because of that original transaction. Giorno had inherited his stand from Dio, who only gained the world because Enya used one of the arrows that Diavolo sold to her. Diavolo had unknowingly created the conditions that would be his own defeat. More than likely, she was also the reason for Stone Ocean. We're not sure about where did these pieces of the arrow come from, but Enya did have 2 arrows left. Nothing's confirmed, but I think it's pretty possible. Now, we understand how completely Enya had shaped the world, but seeing a lot of this through the arrows, a lot of these villains that are primary antagonists, it's kind of this connection to the main antagonist, like, oh, we kind of gave you this large thing. So that's why, while I'll give her the title of, you know, most important minor antagonist just off of the arrows, I think we should kind of look to the secondary antagonists. Secondary antagonists form the next tier after that. These characters appear for, you know, more focused periods, like specific arcs, and they have specific functions within the part, usually like a one-time thing. They create important moments and drive specific plot developments, but their influence isn't supposed to reshape the entire story of JoJo the way that Enya did. But I have someone who just might do this. And it all goes back to Erina. And no, I'm not talking about those two guys that had been bullying her because, you know, I got Jonathan to get involved. But actually, you know, tangent. You know those two guys actually have names though? Like Cabbage and Stark. What the hell? Apparently they got their names and it was from the PS2 game. You know, credits to the JoJo wiki. I couldn't really believe that when it happened. But yeah, no, yeah. It starts with Erina. See, on the boat at the end of Phantom Blood, Erina had found herself alone with, you know, a baby. The infant who would become Lisa. The baby was taken in and raised by the Hamon clan, growing up to master the art of Hamon that had saved the Joestars, essentially. And Lisa, you know, eventually had a son, Joseph Joestar, but Joseph wasn't raised by his mother. Due to her revenge against this high-ranking military official that had been a zombie who had served for Dio, that is probably one of the most JoJo's Bizarre Adventure sentences I've ever said. But yeah, after doing so, she had to become a fugitive because, you know, a high-ranking official is a high-ranking official. They didn't know he was a zombie. I'm kind of surprised they didn't know, but put that to the side too. So Joseph was brought up by his grandmother Erina, while Lisa had essentially had to remain distant. And in this time, Lisa is this key Hamon clan figure, so key that she had been entrusted the Red Stone of Asia. But by who? Who gave Lisa the Red Stone of Asia? Who raised Lisa to become the Hamon user that she was, effectively adding a second Hamon hitter to the bloodline that most likely gave us Joseph the prodigy because, you know, you have Jonathan, you have Lisa, then boom, you got Joseph. Who was this? Bro, it's Straitso. You can call him Straits because like Dire Straits, you get the idea, but Straitso. Now Straits represents something completely different from the other secondary antagonist. He was one of Tonpetty's students and trained alongside Zeppeli and Dire in Hamon. He became one of the strongest Hamon users known, and he fought against the Stone Mask vampires. He was scrapping on the side of the Hamon warriors. He saw Jonathan having to smoke his own brother. He was there for a lot of this. And this is like, he's a part of this legacy that was supposed to protect the world from more things like Dio. But above it all, in terms of his contribution, he raised Lisa. He was her mentor, her father figure, and the one who taught her most likely a lot about Hamon alongside the rest of the clan. This makes him effectively Joseph's grandfather on the other side, not Jonathan. So when Battle Tendency begins, we're not dealing with this random villain who crossed paths with the Joestars, right? This is family. Straitso's betrayal is deeper than I'd say a majority of these connections, because you have to see this. He abandoned himself. He abandoned his principles. And worst of it all is that he's betraying the ones that he had essentially helped raise. He had gone on to murder his own grandson. He was going to do this, and it meant nothing to him. And now the next thing I'm gonna say, this is not to the same extent, but this had mirrored the relationship between Jonathan and Dio. But those two had to deal with it in the perspective of, you know, like being brothers, equals, and they came from like different upbringings altogether. It's crazy. Straits had not a single issue in his heart about killing Joseph because he could only see him as an obstacle, the same way that Dio had saw Jonathan. What makes Straits truly interesting as a secondary antagonist is that his actions just stem from personal desire, genuine personal desire, rather than orders from a greater being or a circumstance. He wants immortality, as simple as that. He wants the power that the Stone Mask can provide. He spent his life doing the right thing, and the result he got just seems to be, you know, hey, this wasn't enough for all that I've lived. I kind of wanted more. And this isn't a hired gun. This isn't like Vanilla Ice or something like that, following instructions from Dio, or just like a subordinate altogether. Straitso is, I mean this completely, like while he did get inspired by Dio, he's acting completely on his own initiative. He's driven by his own fears of, you know, aging and death. His transformation into a vampire, just like how Dio had done, was an actual rejection of everything that he once stood for. Except that Dio, Dio had been working on himself, continuously speaking. It's just that, I can't see myself being eventually better. He never broke past that. Straits was a completely different person before this event, and he just switched up. His actions forced Joseph into this, new world of supernatural conflict that he wasn't supposed to be in like that. This feels way more personal too than coincidental, like how a lot of times we have like this hero journey situation where it's all like, okay, a Joestar kind of has to go do this thing because a lot of lineage stuff, Dio stuff, everything's getting packed up in. He's just doing this. So alongside Joseph fighting to save, this random woman that he doesn't know, he's dealing with, it doesn't matter too much to him, but he's dealing with the betrayal of someone who should have been family. Now using techniques that, oh, hey, this killed Jonathan, I'm gonna get you too. And idolizing the man who is the constant issue in the Joestar's lives without even knowing him. I think that's one of the craziest things too. Straits had no clue about Dio like that. He saw him fight once and he saw him kill his friend and he was like, wow, my friend has trained his whole life and you smoked him instantly. That's kind of hot. What the hell? Like, he doesn't know him. And Joseph had to kill family because that grandfather chose personal gain over not just family loyalty. I can't even just say family loyalty. It has to be like loyalty of everything. I guess you can say that the Hamon clan was family, so that can be family loyalty. But bro, he went against everybody just to do this. That's why I think I'll have to give Straitso the title of most important secondary antagonist, and maybe even greater than secondary antagonist. I know that you have to do a lot to be considered a primary antagonist, but man, who else is this important to the streets? I think it's pretty impressive. Did you know that Lisa and Mario Zeppeli were the ones that got clicked up? Like they were grouped up and they were like, oh, okay, we're gonna get this Pillarman shit. And the reason why Lisa had been taking care of Caesar is because it was left up to her. And then it would still go back to Straitso through all of this because he's the one that trained her. All of this Pillarman shit and everything around it is just like, yo, Straits was... man, I just can't believe this. In addition to that, we see that, Straitso's pursuit of his own personal journey, his own personal evolution through any means. Keep that in mind. And the fact that it amounted to failure as he stood alone in the last of his days. Think about this. Not only Dio, but the journey of Cars. Playing the right game for the majority and switching it all up for personal evolution, individuality, becoming something greater, something perfect, just because you want to, just because you can. It's crazy. That is crazy writing. And I think you've effectively been scammed. This is a Straits video now. Like, this is, you got to keep it a stack here. Battle Tendency is supposed to be about loyalty, autonomy, the hubris of individualism, and the power of made families, instead of saying community and this and that, because family can be an all-encompassing thing. And I do think that the Hamon clan and the Joestars, the Zeppelis, this was family, not by blood, but it was family. And Straits being the one to kick it all off, a rejection of all of it, and then being a reflection of both Dio and Cars, but he was there in the middle of his own volition because both of them were too. Ooh, that means a lot. That's kind of hard, not gonna lie. So when we consider importance of more so among secondary antagonists, I think that Straitso stands alone. He combines his, personal agency, family connections, and essentially like a thematic influence in a way that I think no other secondary antagonist really achieves. And I think that's pretty cool. Contenders of the secondary area had been Angelo, because he his stand power had been the reason as to why Joseph saw the picture over the Morio house and all that, and it was specifically Aqua Necklace. But there's some other ones that's like that, but it's like that's not the same thing. It doesn't matter as much. It's not to that level, but yeah, I'd say so. Now, thank you all for watching. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, peace out and Godspeed.